posture at the same time. Back on the earlier slide where we had the number of networks in the thousands for the department, clearly that provides a number of vulnerabilities that we want to close up. How we architect the security solution at the boundaries of each of those networks varies. We need to tighten up on how we're deploying a standard security architecture. Identity services for the enterprise are something that are at the top of the list right now. How is it that we ensure only authorized users are gaining access? When we started these working groups up that I was talking about, we focused in several areas. We're looking at network services, computing services, enterprise or end user devices, and then business processes. So that's how we go about defining a number of initiatives that we will kick off here over the next several months aimed at reducing the infrastructure and optimizing. That strategy has not yet been published, but you will hear about it as the IT Enterprise Strategy and Roadmap, ITESR. We're currently developing an implementation plan for that strategy, and it will take a lot of concerted effort on the part of the components and the engineering community to make some of this happen. Some of it's already started. Many of you are familiar, probably intimately as I am, with the Federal Data Center Consolidation Initiative. But this is just one example of something that's in the 25-point plan that DoD has included in its strategy and is establishing standards for how we're going to go about reducing our data center footprint. In terms of the statistics, the final consolidation plans that we submitted last year to OMB listed DoD as having 772 data centers identified. So those of you that participate in the task force at OMB probably heard those numbers before. I think that it's probably in flux every day, given that the definition that we use really takes us down to a very fine level of granularity. Within DoD, we looked at anything that was 1,000 feet, square feet. OMB wants us to look at everything that's 500 square feet, but we just didn't get our arms around that. So we set our threshold at 1,000, and we're at 772. We were asked, every federal agency was asked to provide their FY11 consolidation plans to OMB a month ago, I believe it was, and that was announced publicly. We had originally said we were going to consolidate 60 this year. That dropped a little bit to 52. But still, if you look at the entire footprint, that's pretty significant. So the components really have a challenge. We're not driving it top down in terms of establishing their targets. We are driving standards that they comport with. Really, the benchmark within the Department of Defense is usually our DoD Enterprise Computing Centers, the DECs, that DISA operates, the Defense Information Systems Agency. We have 14 of those worldwide, and that's what you see illustrated up at the top of the chart here. Those could be other enterprise data centers, not just the DECs. They could be designated by the DoD CIO within a component as serving the entire enterprise. But the strategy is always to move up from a disparate environment up into the most consolidation at the enterprise level that we can achieve. So what you see here in this chart is we have aggregations that we can move into what we call installation processing centers. These could be consolidating the assets that are on an individual base, military base. Those installation processing centers likewise can be consolidated up to an area level or regional level. The Army is actively doing that right now. They're establishing several regional processing centers for military areas of concentration, and they're looking to move things up to that next level. Some things that are existing today out on their own in islands can move directly to those area processing centers, which is illustrated there. We know that there are a number of things that simply will maintain out there, our tactical assets. We have a lot of things in theater that get shipped out there. Certainly, the mission requirements will define whether or not those things are able to be moved to regional or enterprise computing centers, providing reach back. So I told you I was going to talk a little bit about some of the tools that we have for facilitating some of this work. And one of the things that I think you'll hear more of throughout this event are the need for standards for how we manage things and standards for how we talk about things. IT infrastructure library, ITIL, is nothing new to most of you. But we looked around the Department of Defense back in the 2009 time frame and realized that there were a number of initiatives in place to establish ITIL standards, standard processes, standard service catalogs, and we decided that it was time to try and neck that down to ensure that there was some commonality across the department. So we kicked off something that we now call Defense ITIL, and it's resulted in the publication of a service catalog and processes for service operations, service design, and service transition right in process right now. We're also working on the second version of the service catalog to provide more definition to the IT services that are described. So the importance here is really to get our organizations talking about things on the same level playing field. This is really important when we go into areas where we're consolidating within theaters of operation. We are applying this in the Pacific Theater right now. We're working with PACOM, which is the combat command for the Pacific Theater, on consolidating their IT footprint. We've developed these things called theater synchronization plans. And it really is a high-level plan of how it is they're going to reduce their footprint, improve operations, and describe things in a common way. So I encourage you to learn more about Defense ITIL. I won't go into the details here, but I'll be happy to talk to you offline about what we're doing and make some of those resources accessible to you. So I talked earlier about this thing called a federated enterprise architecture. Again, not a new concept, but something that we found is the only possible way of dealing with architecture within DoD due to the size and the range of military operations and business process areas. We set on a path to standardize how we deal with architectures many years ago with our architecture framework, and that itself has evolved over the years. So DODAF, or DoD Architecture Framework-based architectures, are still the foundation of how we deal with architecture. The Federation has not changed that. What the Federation does recognize is that there are centers of excellence and areas of expertise based on functional areas that are the right organizations or right communities to deal with that content. So what you see illustrated in this slide here, if you've not seen it before, at the top level there are things that either we provide or are provided at the federal level that help us to begin to organize and to register the assets that we have. On the far left there, the Federal Enterprise Architecture Reference Models. Again, if you've been working with Scott Bernard, you're aware that there's going to be some change in the reference models at the FEA